Welcome everyone to another episode of What's New in Prisma, where we are talking about the latest news of the Prisma ecosystem and the Prisma community. I'm Nicholas, and I'm here with my colleague Ryan. Ryan,
Yo,
how are you
what's
doing?
happening? I'm doing well. It's a nice sunny day here in Canada, and it's a nice reprieve from the snow. So I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Nice. Yeah, we had a little bit of snow here in Berlin over the weekend as well. And the days seem to be getting longer again, which is really nice. So
Awesome.
I definitely noticed that there's a difference compared to 3 or 4 weeks ago, that the sun is coming out a bit earlier in the morning and also sunsetting a little bit later in the day. So more sunlight definitely brightens up my mood a little bit at the moment.
Me too. Yep.
All right. Yeah, we have a really packed stream today again. So let's get started and talk a little bit about what we are going to cover today. So we had another really big release on Tuesday again with a lot of new features that we'll, of course, talk about and give little demos about. So a couple of things like we changed the Prisma CLI install command. We introduced a couple of more features to the Prisma client API. And also extended the capabilities of Prisma Migrate and introspection with native types. And these are all things that we are going to talk about. And I'm super excited that today we'll have two guests on the show. We'll have our teammate Martina, who's going to speak about her work on documentation and show us around a little bit about the things that have been changing there lately, because actually she's been working on quite a few big changes and refactorings, so to say, of the documentation that we want to highlight today. And then we'll talk to Stephen Jensen, who recently published a course on Udemy about building a full stack app with Prisma, with React, with GraphQL. So all the good stuff in there. And we'll walk through the app that is being built in that course and learn a little bit more about the stack. And of course, we'll drop a coupon and a link for folks to follow that course for free.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Should we start talking about the release?
Let's do it. Yeah, and I can sort of get right into it if you want. I can even share screen and pull up the notes here.
Yeah, why not? I'll let you go ahead and walk through the release notes to get started.
All right, let's do it. So share screen. Let me know if you can see this for the release notes.
Yes, it's there.
Perfect. Okay, so 2.16 landed 2 days ago on Tuesday, and the two things that I'll talk about will be the change to the installation for the CLI. So some of you, so I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about createMany. Starting with the CLI installation changes, some of you may have run into this issue. I know I did early on, where you would see documentation that would say, do npx Prisma something, and you would do that, and then you get all sorts of errors. Things wouldn't be working properly. And the issue there likely is that you are in sort of a state within your workspace where you didn't have the Prisma CLI, which has traditionally, so for Prisma 2, traditionally been installed via @Prisma/CLI. You probably didn't have that in your workspace. So when you did your npx commands, it wasn't picking up that sort of local installation of the CLI. And instead, it was reaching out over the network to get Prisma 1, because Prisma 1 is what existed here at the Prisma namespace. So the change now is that to install the Prisma CLI, you do npm install or yarn add, whatever you're using. You just use Prisma instead. So straight up Prisma like that. And what this will help with is if you do happen to do an npx command, npx Prisma whatever, you'll pick up the latest Prisma CLI instead of Prisma 1. So that helps to ease over some of these issues that folks have been encountering. And The way that this will work here is right now, if you still install at Prisma/CLI, you will still get it. You'll get it at the latest version. But in the future, when you go to do that, you will get a message saying that you can no longer get latest from at Prisma/CLI. Instead, you'll need to do npm install Prisma instead. So a fairly simple change for the most part. I think some folks might be importing things from the Prisma CLI, especially if you're doing, I guess, more complicated things, perhaps. I'm not sure. But you might have to go up and go through your code base, do a global search, look for instances of at Prisma/CLI, change that up for Prisma. That's one of the upgrade steps to make there. Do you know, I was trying to think, Niko, of any specific scenarios where that might be the case, where someone would be like importing directly from here in their project. Do you know of any good examples?
This could be the case if you're using functionality from kind of the actual npm package for some work that you might be doing under the hood of the Prisma CLI, but I'm not actually sure. So I think there is also a package that's called @prisma/SDK that exports a couple of the functions that people can use if they want to go a little bit lower level and they don't want to work with the CLI commands directly. But to be honest, I don't really know. So before I say anything wrong, I think I'm just not going to say anything here.
Cool. I don't know of any myself, but in the release notes, you do see the note to go and check. Maybe you're pulling something in from at Prisma/CLI. If you're doing kind of the more straightforward things with Prisma, probably not, but might be worthwhile to check anyway. The next one I'll talk about is createMany. So this is really cool. This is something that a lot of people have been asking for, a lot of people have been waiting for, is especially useful now that we have database seeding in place, which I will, I'll demo this with the whole db seed command, which was new at the last release. And it's great because you now can insert data in a bulk fashion. You don't have to create a loop and to do one at a time and await each iteration of those inserts. It's this much more efficient way now to bulk insert your data. So you call this method here, createMany, on your model, and then you can just supply it with an array of data, and that will go in just as you would expect. So this is useful for many cases, seeding being one of them, but also many other instances where you need to just bulk insert data in your application. And it is a preview feature, so on your client, you will have to opt into it. So preview features, just stick that createMany string into your preview features array, and you will get access to that. So I think, Niko, I can go show this off if you think it's time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do it. So I've got a workspace here. And what have I got? I've got this empty server file. That's right. I've got nothing going on in there, but I do have this seed file, which I will demo createMany with. But before I even get there, I want to just quickly point out that in my dev dependencies, I've got Prisma here now. So Prisma, if you just do, for example, npm install Prisma, I'll save it as a dev dependency. If you install Prisma, before this release, you would have gotten Prisma 1, but now you get Prisma 2.16. Right. So that can go right in there as is. And just to sort of show what we get if we do install at Prisma CLI, you will get Prisma CLI 2.16. Now, probably not a good idea to have both of these in your project at the same time. I assume there probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but these are kind of two competing entities now, effectively, I think, in your node modules. I don't know all the technical details of how these would kind of mash together, but probably best to only have one of them. So
yeah, it would be interesting to know which one wins, actually, because I guess that both include a binary that's called Prisma. Mm-hmm. If you were to dig into kind of the node modules, you would find this executable that's called Prisma in both packages. And yeah, it would be interesting to know which one is being used. But of course, that's not something that you want to do. When you upgrade to 2.16, we just recommend you to switch the package from at Prisma CLI to Prisma.
Absolutely. Yep, that is for sure. And if you don't have a dev dependency or a regular dependency of the Prisma CLI at all, and you just do npx Prisma whatever, you'll now get pointed to the latest Prisma CLI. So very nice that way. But of course, you should have latest version in your dev dependencies instead. Just better to keep track of versioning that way, so you don't run into conflicts. All right, let's take a look at the model, schema.prisma. I've got this context model. So I've got a really simple table. It's called contacts, and I've opted into the createMany preview feature here. One thing to note is this feature, as far as I can tell, won't work on SQLite. I tried it out with SQLite, no dice. It says that the database is not supported. I don't know of any other databases that are not supported. I'm using Postgres here. Do you know, Niko, if it's otherwise works all around, or are there any
Actually, I have no idea. I wasn't aware that it's not supported on SQLite. So interesting that you note that.
Yeah, and I wonder if I was just in a sort of weird state with versioning or whatever at that point. But the message that I remember seeing was that when I went to call createMany, while using SQLite, it just wasn't going to work. So be careful of that. But otherwise, it should do just fine. So I've got Faker in here. Niko, are you familiar with this library, Faker? It's really good for...
I've heard of it, right? It generates kind of random but real-looking fake data, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. I've used it for a long time, and it is great for just what it says on the tin, fake data. So you will be able to generate random, but like Niko says, realistic fake data with it. And this is a cool potential for seeding your database. You may want to have data prepared that's like exactly in the shape that you want it to be the same every time you seed your database, but you may also just need some like random data that is somewhat realistic. And if that's the case, Faker works pretty well for this case. So in this function where we're going to seed our data, previously we would have looped over this array of contacts that I've got and inserted them. But now in this main function, I can just do await Prisma contacts createMany. There's this new method, createMany, and I've got data, which I'll point to this contacts array that I'm assigning above here.
Call to createMany return if you check the return value of it.
Let's check it. Yep. Created equals await, and we'll console log created. So it's in there. I am curious myself. Cool. So that's it. createMany. Instead of looping now, you just do it all in one shot. And we've got this fancy new Prisma DB seed command under a preview feature flag like that. And if we run this, let's see what we get. Cool. Count 100. Awesome. And I have got table plus. There's my 100 rows of fake data. Very simple, very easy to put this in now. And you know, if you're doing something where you want to run this, so this is touching on the seed command, which we touched on previously. But if you're doing something where you want to like run this and have your database in a like kind of a clean slate state every time you do, you could just come in here to your main function, and you could do await Prisma contacts bleed many. So it'll clear them all out. And then every time you go to seed your database, it will take everything out, put everything new back in, and that will work just fine. And the cool thing too is this is really quick. So like here's, I'm bumping up from 100 now to 10,000 rows. And the createMany method does this in no time at all. So if we take a look at the time that it took there, it's almost the same as 100 rows. And now I've got a database chock full of 10,000 rows of data. So very, very cool combination of commands that we've got now, and createMany I think will be great for many, many people.
Very nice.
Absolutely. Right. I will stop there and let's continue the show.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen then. Just give me a second to prepare and show the release notes first. Share screen. And here we go. Back to the release page. Oh, let's pick up where you left off and talk about another new feature in the Prisma Client API, one that actually has been requested since pretty much the GraphQL days, if I recall correctly. So enabling people to order by relation fields is certainly something that people had requested back then already. Of course, back then we didn't have an API to work with a database directly, but instead we expose a GraphQL API. But the operations looked somewhat similar to the ones that we have in Prisma Client today. And this order by relation fields really was something that people wanted to have for a long, long time. And we're excited to finally bring it to the Prisma Client API as a preview feature. So I'm also going to jump straight into the demo for this one. So I have it prepared right here. Increasing the font a little bit. So let's look at what we currently have. We are still on 2.15. I'll quickly run Prisma Studio so that we can see the sample data that we're going to work with. It's just very basic 2 users called Alice and Bob, and then a number of posts that we will want to order by their title for now. So I'm going back into the project. Here is my script that I've prepared. And what we're doing at the moment is we're just ordering by title. And in fact, I already include the snippet that I want to show later, which allows me to sort by the name of the author, which is not yet possible. So I'm getting red squiggly lines because I'm on 2.15 and order by relations is not yet possible. So let's order the post just by their title to confirm that the initial ordering actually works. Here is what we get, ordered by title F, J, S, and W. 4 posts are sorted alphabetically according to the title as specified right here. Now, I mentioned that this is not yet possible because I'm on 2.15, so let's go through the upgrade process and make sure that we're using the latest version. I'm deleting node modules, reinstalling everything. And once I did that, this should now be allowed to include the order by author name as another ordering condition. Restarting the TypeScript server to get rid of this error. All right, and now we can already see that this is now allowed. We can include the author in here as a sorting condition. And if I run the script, we'll see that the posts are now first ordered by the name of the author, which is Alice. And even though the title of the second post of Alice is a W and would be last in the list, it's now the second in the list because we first order by name and only then by the title of the post. So that's order by relations, really convenient for a lot of different use cases and something that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. Do note that you have to enable it. It's still in preview. I don't know why it was commented out and still worked. I'm just going to accept this. Maybe I didn't save the file before or something. But yeah, you have to enable it explicitly as a preview feature right here in your Prisma schema on the client generator. So far, so good for the order by relation feature. So let's move on to the improvements that we made to native types. And here I quickly want to make another call to action for everybody who's interested in this feature, because we're coming really, really close to stabilizing it. And we really need your feedback on the last mile of stabilizing. If everything goes well, this should be promoted to stable in the next release in 2 weeks already. But of course, it's always better to have more people who test it and try it out for various use cases. So it would be really great if you could try it out and let us know in this GitHub issue right here whether the feature is working for you or not. So the biggest change that we introduced in this release to the native types is a new type that is called unsupported, and that takes an argument. And that argument is a string that defines a type from the underlying database that is not yet natively supported by Prisma in the Prisma schema and by Prisma client. So this is basically an escape hatch, how people can still use types that are not yet supported by Prisma, but still surface them in the Prisma schema, and even use models that they could previously not use, where they had required columns of an unsupported type on their tables. And to show you what exactly this means, I prepared another demo. So let me just go ahead and open that. Code unsupported. So let's see what this currently looks like. We are on 2.15. The schema is empty, and we're pointing to this Postgres database that's called testdb3. And that Postgres database pretty much looks like this at the moment. We have a table that's called location and a table that's called user, but I'm more interested in the location table because that has a required column that's called point, and that is a point type. And the point type is a geometry type in Postgres that takes an X and a Y coordinate. And the point type is also not yet supported in the Prisma schema. So I quickly want to show you what happens in Prisma 2.15, so before the release, if you were to introspect this schema. Just making sure that node modules are installed. So when I now run Prisma introspect, it's going to introspect the database and create Prisma models for the tables that it finds in the database. And specifically, what's going to be interesting, didn't update immediately. Thanks, VS Code. Just what do I do this? Right, here we go. This is what it looks like in 2.15. So introspection did recognize that there is a column of a type that is unsupported, but what it did, it just added it to the Prisma schema and commented it out. And the problem with this is that if I now want to use this type, the location type, inside of my actual application code, and if I wanted to create a location like this, so I'm trying to create a location that is fine from a Prisma client perspective, because all Prisma client sees on this model is a name, and I'm providing this. So TypeScript is okay with this code, but if I run it, there will be an error because I'm not providing a value for the required field. And in fact, that's not the error that I wanted to show. And I don't know, it's just sometimes a little bit weird with node modules and switching versions back and forth. But let me just try this again. Okay, this also didn't go as expected, I guess, because it shouldn't have created this. That's weird. That just worked before when I tested it like half an hour ago with that flow. Let me just try once more. Do you see what I might have done wrong here? Why it creates? So, like, according to my understanding, Prisma client shouldn't be allowed to create a record, a location record in the database, because I'm not providing a point value. But actually, I think, okay, I know what's wrong. I still have a default value set. So that's actually something that I wanted to show you a bit later, but I'm just going to change that in Postico now. So it did create the record because point had a default value set here in the database. So I'm going to remove the default value and just run the same code again. And now I'm expecting the error that the location record can't be created because no value for the required point column is provided. And here we go. That's exactly the error that I wanted to show. We have a null constraint violation on the field's point. And this error is thrown by the database because the database won't allow me to insert anything that doesn't carry a value for point. So that's a problem in the kind of workflow that people had. So let me go ahead and show you how this can now be resolved with the latest version 2.16. And I'm upgrading, and as Ryan mentioned, I'm changing the Prisma CLI package from @prisma/CLI to just Prisma. Removing node modules, reinstalling them, which will also regenerate Prisma client. And for this, let me delete the location and user model so that we start with an empty Prisma schema because I want to show introspection again. There you go. This time it did update in place. And now the point is actually part of my generated location model right here. And it has this type unsupported that I mentioned before. What this now, or how this now affects the Prisma client API is that the create operation, if I'm not mistaken, should actually be forbidden because through Prisma client, I'm not able to provide a value for the point because it's not supported in Prisma client. So I'm getting a TypeScript error that the create property does not even exist on location. I cannot create location records at the moment because Prisma and the database are not able to fill in the required value for this point. But what's really cool is that we also added a new way for people to provide default values for the data in their database when the type of a column is not supported. And that follows this notation here. So we're just using the @default attribute that we already know. And then we use this db-generated function. And in there, we can provide a string that is going to directly map to the underlying SQL migration. And in fact, I can now execute that with yarn Prisma migrate. So I'm using Prisma migrate to now create the default value for this in the database. And if I refresh Postico here, we also now see that we are inserting this as a default value. And consequently, in my script, the create operation is now allowed because there is a default value for point, and it's not required anymore for me to provide it. So if I run yarn dev now, this is going to work, and a new record is going to be inserted. So that's pretty much exactly what happened at the beginning of my demo here when I accidentally inserted that record. It was also because the default value was still set. All right, that was my demo of the unsupported type. I think it's really nice because it gives a lot more flexibility to people that are actually using database types that are not yet supported. We have a lot of users, for example, that are using the PostGIS extension for all kinds of geolocation types and calculations, and these folks now will have a much easier time to work with the types in their database. There are a couple of other features that I'm going to skim over. So DB generated is what I already showed you. And then we added new native type attributes for Postgres. So now we support the INET, the money, the OID, and the Cytex type. And a couple of more changes. So if you're interested in all that, you can go ahead and read through the release notes for version 2.16. And I think that closes the section about the release, and we can move on. And I think we can bring on our first guest that we have. And that's our teammate, Martina. I'll put her up on the stream. Here we go.
Welcome.
Hey, Martina.
Hi.
Welcome.
Glad to be
How
here
are you
finally.
doing?
Yeah, not bad. It's still pretty dark here in Denmark, but more sun every day.
Yeah, it's slowly coming along. The days are getting brighter. Cool. Yeah. So like maybe for the folks who, of course, are watching and are not working at Prisma and maybe haven't seen you around, could you quickly introduce yourself and tell a little bit about since when you work at Prisma, what exactly you do, and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So I have worked with Prisma since April last year. So I'm coming up to my Prismaversary quite soon. I am a recovering developer that now does technical writing. So I write documentation, which essentially means I get to play around with all the new stuff before anyone else and write about it, which I really enjoy.
Nice.
I come from the .NET world, and now it's all TypeScript and Go, so it's been a change, but I'm really enjoying it.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your recent work here at Prisma and things that you've been working on, because the first version of the Prisma documentation, I think we launched back in March, along with the beta release, so a little bit before you joined. And then once you joined in April, you pretty much took over the entire work of improving the documentation. And I think one big thing that you've been working on for the past couple of months really was a big refactoring. Yeah, maybe if you could share your screen and walk us through a little bit the things that you have changed in particular.
Absolutely. Just one moment and I will share screen.
Yes.
And there we go. Can you now see my screen?
Yes, it's right there.
Perfect.
And I see something that wasn't there 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that's a really nice landing page.
Yes. So one of the big things that we've done recently, the most noticeable things, is we gave the docs a little bit of a makeover. So we have this new homepage, which is done by our design team and our web engineer, which sort of summarizes everything that's available in the docs. So you have a bit more of a ta-da experience when you first land on the Prisma documentation.
Love it.
And in addition to, jazzing up the homepage, we have also simplified the design in general. So now there's more text on white. And I know people are probably going to ask for a dark mode. But more focus on the content and trying to strip away as many unnecessary distractions as possible. So quite a lot of work done on the design.
Yeah, we also changed the font, if I recall correctly, right? The font, and it makes such a big difference. Like once it was introduced, it looked so much cleaner than before. So I'm super excited about this change in particular, actually.
I know. I woke up one day and it just happened, which is wonderful.
All right. I wish we had now like a before-after screenshot, but I don't think I have one ready of the docs, how they look.
We'll have to go back in the repository, download, and build it again and do it before and after. Yeah, I hadn't quite realized how much it changed until I started planning for this presentation. So in addition to design changes, we have also, you might have noticed, separated things out into sections, because it turns out we have quite a lot of documentation now. We try to keep up with the releases and make sure there's content, within 24 hours of a new release coming out. So there's been a lot produced. So we now have concepts, guides, and reference in separate sections that you can page through, and then you have a contextual nav on the left here.
Nice.
And speaking of guides, that is a section that we've been growing recently. So you might have seen the seeding guide has popped up, which features Ryan's video. We also have a very long, meaty guide about transactions. So if you know all things transactions in Prisma, then check that out. And we plan to add a lot more guides in future that sort of through a scenario rather than just being conceptual kind of overview. We have also, and this was my big beast of a project, separated out all the reference documentation into its own area. And yesterday, I think, we merged in finally the client API reference. So now you have the style of documentation where you can go and look at every method or query option or nested query or condition and find information about it, but also examples. So hopefully that'll make it a lot easier to search, first of all. And if you want information about a very specific part of your query, you can look it up here. And
that is so nice to have this overview of everything that we have in the API. Before that, I think we didn't really have the concept section, and we had the concept section was basically called reference and was somewhat mixed content of some referencey stuff and also more explanatory. And now I think we have a much cleaner separation with things that are in concept, really focus on explaining the ideas behind something, a little bit about the workflows, and the reference really is just more like a manual, right? You can just look up something and have a very concise overview of things that are provided. So I definitely recommend everybody to go ahead and check out this new API reference here that Martina created. Really awesome work.
That's definitely what we've done. And we've trimmed out a lot of the reference stuff from that concepts area. So now, rather than looking at just the createMany method, for instance, you now kind of get to go by scenario instead. So how do I create multiple records? And rather than just giving you the method, we just sort of describe how it works, what the SQL looks like, what are my other options? So you get a bit more of a holistic view in concepts. So nice. that was a big project, and I'm super glad that it's done. And I'm looking forward to getting feedback and to kind of grow the reference documentation from here. What else is there? Yes, we added this was a bit sneaky. We added a support section recently, and we have a few help articles in there already. But this is an area where we're going to put FAQs. So if people are asking a lot of the same question, we have a section now where we can direct you to answers, so like a problem solutions style thing, which is maintained primarily by other Ryan, who does support. So he uses his skills to gather all the commonly asked questions and put answers here.
Yeah, perfect.
Which is very useful. And I will round off with, as we've been adding content and redesigning things, we also in the background have been creating a lot of custom components for our doc site, which you can have a look at, like if you want to contribute or anything like that. You're free to use our MDX components. We have spent a lot of time.
For the people who have no idea what MDX actually is, could you describe what MDX actually is, on a high level maybe?
Yeah, so it's a way of mixing Markdown, which we use for writing documentation, with components. So you can embed a component inside Markdown and do slightly more advanced things. So
right, specifically React components, right?
Yes,
so it allows to
right.
Enrich Markdown with more interactive and more powerful components than just the standard kind of block quote and code block that you have, but you can actually add a lot of functionality to it.
Exactly. And you can see samples on the page on my screen now where we have these tab blocks and slightly more advanced code highlighting and things like that. So we spent a lot of time trying to make them as usable as possible. And I have a lot of shortcuts for them because I use them all the time. So all in
Good.
all, like a lot has changed in the docs, and there's a lot of we're writing as fast as we can to keep up with all the GitHub issues. And I want to take, speaking of GitHub, I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone that creates pull requests, whether you're fixing typos or you've spotted an error in a code sample or something. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everyone that takes the time to create a PR. Keep doing it. And just know that you're really appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. We have this little button at the bottom of every page that says edit this page on GitHub, brings you directly to GitHub where you can create a fork of the repo with your own account. You can go ahead and edit, fix a typo, submit a pull request, and a couple of hours or maybe 1 or 2 days later, we're going to look at it and merge it. All right,
Yes,
Martina, thank you so much for coming on and giving us this tour. I hope that we'll see you soon here again. And for now, we'll let you go. Have a good rest of the day,
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Yeah.
Cheers. That's really, really nice. Have you actually contributed a lot to the docs yet, Ryan, or like rather worked on other platforms like the blog, for example?
I might have a minimal amount of work done on the docs. I can't even remember, to be honest. I know like Nexus docs, I've done stuff, but Prisma docs,
Right.
I'm not sure. If I've done anything, it's been terribly small. Nothing of significant contribution there. Martina definitely drives that, and we do have a lot of contributors outside of just Martina. But I have not done a whole lot. Maybe I'll do some in the future. How about you?
True, but for like the Nexus docs, right? I think there you were a little bit involved, and we were using the same tech stack there, similar MDX components and all that. So I think the workflows are very similar for the Nexus and the Prisma docs.
Do that, yeah.
All right, cool. Let's move on to our next guest, and that's Stephen Jensen, who is going to talk about his Udemy course. Here he is. Hey, Stephen, nice to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this course that I just wrapped up and launched last week.
Very cool. Yeah, so maybe let's get started a little bit with, or like maybe you could just like also introduce yourself real quick so that people have a good idea about your background and yeah, how you came to make this course.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So although, Martina was saying that she's a recovering developer, and I have to admit that I'm a recovering PhD scientist. So I went to grad school and I was studying molecules moving around on surfaces and looking at them with images. And I got into web development because I wanted a way to keep track of like all the pictures that I was taking of these molecules doing stuff. And as I kind of got more and more into this, at the time this was like Ruby on Rails, I was like, this is amazing. Like I love being able to kind of develop web apps. And so I just kind of fell in love with it and ended up transitioning to be, a full stack developer. And what kind of inspired me to make this course was, like way back when I was learning web development, like I was going through code school, and there were like a lot of really good tutorials, like intro tutorials about, how to get started with, React or JavaScript or these things. But I really want to find, but I kind of struggled kind of getting to the next stage. Like, okay, if I want to actually build a web application that's interesting and useful to people and has all of the things like user login and being able to create records and update them, be able to do all the CRUD things, like how do you actually bring all of this stuff together into a web app that's actually useful? And so I was really excited when Niko reached out to me, I think it might have been in September, saying, like, hey, would you be interested in making like a longer form course? I've been kind of doing shorter form YouTube videos that I have over at CodeMochi on YouTube, kind of shorter forms like getting started with Prisma and other kind of React things. And so I was like really excited to be able to kind of build this like longer form course. that I just
Yeah, exactly. I think you were like one of the first people that built or that wrote really nice tutorials and recorded video tutorials even about Prisma 2 like a couple of month ago. And yeah, we kind of reached out to you and asked you if you wanted to do this for Udemy in a more professional style as well. And super excited that the course finally launched. So let's talk about the course and what kind of application is being built, and maybe a little bit about the tech stack as well. So if you could maybe just give a high-level overview of what kind of app is being built, and then we'll dive a little bit into the tech that we picked for this course.
Oh, sure. So the particular app that we're building is called News Prism. And so it's an RSS reader, but with like a little bit of a twist. And so the idea is that people, if you've heard, there's a website called Feedly that I guess is kind of similar, where you can kind of create your favorite feeds, and then you can bundle them together. These are like RSS feeds, and then you can bundle them together. So you can make like a New York Times and a CNN, and then bundle it together as like a world news feed. And then you can be able to like list out like all of the articles that are coming from both of those feeds. But it has user login so that people can like each other's feeds, and yeah, you can then also save your favorite articles that you like on kind of a saved articles list that you can access later. And so we end up using Next.js and Prisma kind of form the two core libraries and frameworks for this. And so I selected Next.js because I think it's amazing on the front end for just being able to kind of take care of like pages and routing and just like all of this stuff that you used to have to kind of do yourself. Next.js kind of like automates a lot of that. And then especially with like Prisma 2 coming out and it being a library that you can run in that you can run like within Next.js, it just made it a lot easier compared to Prisma 1, where you'd have to run it in like a separate Docker container. So we end up using API routes to form this like a backend GraphQL server that we end up using the Prisma library to kind of do all the data fetching for us.
Very, very nice. I just dropped a link to the course in the comments, and also a coupon code that people can use to get the course for free. So you should definitely go ahead and check that out. And I think we can maybe dive a little bit into the actual code if you're up for it, Stephen. So if you want, we can share your screen and walk through kind of the different parts of the app. We can start maybe at the database layer with Prisma, and then walk our way up to the front end. So adding you to this.
You guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So I have the code available here on Captain Chemist / News Prism. And so yeah, anyone wants, they can go and kind of check it out. So let me first dive into the schema for this particular project. So there are a few different models that we're using. So we have a feed, which is kind of the RSS feed itself. And then we also have a bundle. And so bundles can have many feeds. And so the idea here is, like I was kind of mentioning before, if you want to have like a New York Times and a CNN feed, you could kind of bundle that together. All right. And so under the feeds here, you have like a couple different things, like you have an author. So when you end up creating a feed, for example, we end up setting it up in the permissions so that like somebody can only delete a feed that they created in the first place. So there's this concept of like ownership.
All right.
You can also have likes, so that like as people are liking the feed, we have also this user object where we're kind of like adding, we're like linking their user object with the particular feed under this likes array here. So what's kind of cool with Prisma is that although it's like if you look at feed and then you look at user, although like an author can have one user here, likes can have many users, and because we're able to kind of define these different relations here, we're allowed to do this.
Very, very cool. And that seems like a super useful kind of reference, because I think these kinds of features like adding likes in an app or favorites is just a super common feature that a lot of people will want to implement in their apps. So here they have a really nice reference for how these kinds of features can be modeled with Prisma, and then also, of course, implemented on the GraphQL layer. So yeah, maybe let's move on to the implementation of the API layer and look at the GraphQL schema. I think you're using an SDL first approach with Apollo server for this, right? Or
I am, yeah.
How do you construct your GraphQL schema?
So yeah, like I kind of mentioned before, what's so cool about Next.js is that you can do this. You can create this folder here called API, and then here you can end up just creating various like API endpoints. And so I ended up using Apollo server, and it was the I think it was like the micro version. Yeah, it was. So this is one that's designed for like Lambda functions. And so this is like a really compact and small library here that we can use for creating our server.
Nice. And what does the GraphQL schema then look like? Where are you defining it? The type defs, basically.
Yeah, I can go into, so that's under utilities, and then API, and then type defs. So here I'm just kind of manually laying out all of these things. I'm forgetting there's like a really good library that can auto-generate this for you. I know you guys, I'm forgetting what it's called.
You might be referencing GraphQL code generator, I think, which has a lot of different plugins to transform GraphQL schemas, for example, in TypeScript types, even in like React hooks that you can use on the front end. But as far as I know, for that SDL first approach of implementing your GraphQL schema, there are not any tools yet that work together with Prisma. And that would like kind of be able to generate a GraphQL schema based on your Prisma models. It would be an interesting extension or plugin for GraphQL code generator to one day allow this. But I think at the moment, at least from my understanding of the GraphQL tooling space, this is not yet possible. Ryan, have you heard of anything like this maybe?
No, I am not certain of what you would look for to do that. Yeah, I don't know. I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, so you just like type out the schema as you would with any other ORM, basically. That's the state how it works today.
Yeah, that's right. So we end up just kind of like manually like defining all of these different things. And I tried to use a lot of the same conventions that I guess that I think you guys use at Prisma for how you name these things. So at least it's like, although this is long, it's at least super consistent. So that, that saves a lot of heartache in the future.
Very nice.
Yeah.
One more question. How did you implement the permission layer for GraphQL?
Oh yeah, so we ended up using GraphQL Shield. And so this is something where in the kind of the tutorial, we hook it up initially, but then kind of disable it because we end up disabling it until we get to the very end and then kind of turn it on, because I think for development purposes, having this in place is kind of more trouble than it's worth. But what's super cool here is that you can define these rules. So here I have this rule is authenticated. And so in the context, I end up creating this user object. So what I'll do on the back end then is, so I'm using auth0 for all the user login. And so there's also this really nice library for Next.js where you end up creating this session that you have available to you, and you can. And so what we'll do then is we'll save this, like there's this object that will have the auth0 information in it, and we'll then make a Prisma user object. And so we'll end up basically storing it here in the context. And so then we can tell that if this isn't present, that the person hasn't logged in, and we can like throw errors based on these particular rules. But what's so cool about this is that it's also flexible, so that if you wanted to, like, let's say have roles where you wanted to have an admin or something, you could add a field called admin or a role, and then if it was admin or something like that, you could then check for this as some other rule here, and then you can like string together rules to be able to check for various things on these different mutations.
Right. So you can define these kind of more fine-grained access rules for who should be allowed to do what in the GraphQL API, basically, right?
Right.
And declare it declaratively using GraphQL Shield.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like that. Like I've used like GraphQL Shield a couple of times myself. We also use it in an example that we have in the Prisma examples repo. So folks who want to check that out, definitely go ahead and go to the Prisma examples repo. The example that we have is called GraphQL Auth that is using this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you currently have an instance of the app running so that you can just to wrap up, maybe just like show us around the actual functionality of the app?
Yeah, sure. I can. So I just have this running locally on my computer. So I end up using auth0 on the front end. And what's kind of cool is I also set up optimistic mutations so that you'll see, for example, when I like this, that it's like immediate. And so it will. And so what this means is that it will send a request off to the server, but in the meantime, we'll also like locally change the cache for Apollo so that we can get these updates like almost immediately. So you can like different. So this is on the homepage, and so we're looking at different bundles here. So you can see here, this is like a world news bundle that has the feeds of New York Times and CNN, and that we also have this concept of tags. And so what if we ended up creating like a future bundle that was local news or something like this? You could add, you can have tags that are kind of shared between the different ones, because tags are like a separate model within, at the Prisma level. So you can look at so you can see that there are different bundles here. We can see that there's like the author information. This is pulled from auth0, so it's like this. So this is just like the gravicon that's used there. You can also like different articles here. So if I go to this like saved articles page, you can see that there's like a list of all the saved articles I've ever had. If you end up like clicking on this, you can open up the particular link to the article. And if you like this, or if you unlike it, you can see that it immediately goes away. Then if you go into one of these bundle pages, maybe I'll do the example over at feeds. So here, for example, if I click on New York Times, you can see all of the, you can be able to edit all the things here.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to, I could add a new tag, and we end up using like the Prisma. We end up doing like a search basically based on this substring. So as you start to type, so if I just type in E, for example, this will come back with all of the tags that have been created, in this case, web and design, that have the letter E. But that you'll always have the option, in this case, since E isn't actually a tag, you could always just like add this onto the end of it. So in this kind of this one graphic, in this one UI element, you can either like add existing tags or create new ones, and it's pretty much seamless to the user. So
very nice.
So here I could say like a newspaper or something, and so then since it's a new tag, that's the only thing that's there, and then I can just add it. And so from here I can then click submit, and you can see that it like almost instantaneously shows up. Just to kind of round this out, if I wanted to make a new feed, I could go here, and I had already pulled this up. Okay, yeah, so there are like list of like RSS feeds. So here was one, here's a photography one for f stoppers. So if I go back here, I could say f stoppers. I can add this URL, and then I could add a tag of photography. Since this is a new tag, you can see that nothing's coming there. But if I want to also say web, then I could add this here. So once this is done, you can then press submit, and then you can see that it's here. And so as you click around to these different ones, you'll end up getting like the different articles showing up down below.
Fantastic. That's impressive.
So so I think that this particular sample app covers like a lot of the things that you want to do for a full stack application. So I'll be really interested to see what people think about it. And thanks for having me on. This has been great.
Thank you for the tour, Stephen. Do you want to plug anything before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. I'm really excited, that I was able to launch this. So be sure to check out the coupon code so you guys can get it for free for the next couple of days. I also have a website, codemochi.com, where I have a lot of other blog posts and I guess a YouTube channel where I'll also post videos there. So for any of these like blog posts and stuff I do, I always try to have both the both like an article with the text and the code as well as the video. I find for me like having the combination of the both of them is really powerful. Yeah, I think that's it.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much for coming on this show,
Stephen. It's been really great chatting with you guys.
Thanks, Stephen.
Have a good rest of the day. Cheers. All right. That looks amazing. Let me get you on the same size here. Here we go. Yeah, I'm super curious to learn how people find the course. So if you want to learn about full stack development, if you're just getting into development, maybe I think this is a really nice opportunity to just learn end-to-end how you build a full stack application from the front end to the database with a really, really good instructor, Stephen. All right, I think we're coming close to the end. There are a couple of more things that I want to mention and that I'm going to share my screen for before we wrap up. So again, going to head and share. Here we go. So this is the website from Stephen's course. The URL I already dropped in the comments. We'll also add it to the video description later on, along with the coupon code. But what I wanted to show you is that Wes Boss, who is another really prominent teacher in the JavaScript world, he re-recorded the Full Stack Advanced React and GraphQL course. So that's another really exciting course for full stack development. And the first version of this course was built on top of Prisma 1. And he now re-recorded everything. And for the new version of the course, he is using Keystone.js as a backend. And in fact, Keystone works, or it's a headless CMS that either works with Mongo or with a relational database like Postgres. And the course also gives you the choice between working with either MongoDB or with Prisma and Postgres as a database. So again, we recommend to check this out as well. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it seems like we'll actually have the folks from Keystone on What's New in Prisma in 2 weeks. So definitely come along and check out that episode then as well.
Awesome.
That was one thing. And then 2 more quick things about meetups that we have coming up. So first, the Advanced TypeScript Trickery Meetup, an open mic session where we invite everybody who's doing cool stuff with TypeScript to share what they are working on and maybe little bits that they've learned along the way. This is going to happen next Tuesday, February 9th. So definitely make sure to tune in if you're excited about TypeScript. And of course, the second one is the TypeScript Berlin meetup, the meetup group that we have. And we're currently looking for speakers for the next TypeScript Berlin meetup that is not yet scheduled, but that is coming up at some point again. So if you are working on something interesting with TypeScript, this is your chance to share it with the community. You can just drop us an email at events@prisma.io if you want to speak at this event. All right, I think that closes it for today. A little bit over an hour, but that was a nice session today, Ryan.
Yeah, that's great. Very, very good. And I am looking forward to the next one too.
Yeah, and actually in the next one, we'll probably not only have the folks from Keystone on, but also Hervé, our VP of product, is going to talk a little bit about the refreshed product roadmap that everybody can look at online. It's linked in the documentation, or you can also find it at pris.ly/roadmap. And one thing that I can also already tease a little bit, that is pretty much the most commonly asked question about the things that are coming up. We are actually actively working on the MongoDB connector. So if you're taking a look at the roadmap, this is in the work in progress column. And some birds told me that there is quite a bit of progress already that's being made there. So without kind of promising too much, I think next week or in 2 weeks at the next episode, we'll learn a little bit more from Hervé about what is coming up there.
Love it.
All right. I think time to wrap up. Thanks for joining me today, Ryan, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you soon. Bye-bye.